Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. It's a quick walk through the front line for the 25th of November 2022. What has happened overnight? Well, let's just give you the figures that Ukraine have announced for the losses on the Russian side. 430, so an uptick of the soldiers liquidated, 430 soldiers, 1 tank, 5 APCs, 6 artillery systems, or MLRS, so that's pretty useful, 6 UAVs, 4 vehicles or fuel tanks, and 2 pieces of special equipment. That could be any number of things. So a slight uptick, favourable for the Ukrainians there. Obviously, no figures for the Ukrainians. Make that what you will. Russian terrorists have hit a hospital with rockets. Luckily, no one was hurt. This is interesting in light of what the UK Ministry of Defence have said, and we know that Zaporizhzhia hospital was hit. A hospital in Zaporizhzhia was hit the other day. The UK Ministry of Defence has said Russia is using Iranian drones to strike the Ukrainian electrical grid and are likely targeting medical facilities, making life even tougher for Ukrainians facing a harsh winter. Now, when the UK Ministry of Defence say these things, these aren't just thrown out willy-nilly as a kind of like, yeah, we're just saying this. There is thought put into every word, and each word sort of means something particular. They were talking about this on Ukraine the Latest podcast yesterday about this announcement. So likely means, and this is coming from Dom Nichols, who's saying that actually he gave a list of all the modal sort of verbs that you use or modal words that give you probability and assigned an actual percentage chance. And he said that likely, I think it was 70 to 75% chance. So the UK MOD is saying the Russians are likely targeting hospitals and medical facilities, then that is some kind of certainty, or at least there's a distinct probability that is based on information and intelligence. So this isn't just like, oh, we think they're probably targeting medical facilities. It's like, yeah, we've got a 70 to 75% probability assessment of them attacking medical facilities, and that's based on a whole load of stuff. And they've got form. So they've got form from I think the beginning of the Ukraine war itself, but also you go back to Syria. I think it was the Red Cross that gave Russia a list of hospitals in the country. I think it was something like 24 hospitals. Correct me if I'm wrong. 24 hospitals with geolocations, so coordinates. It said, please do not hit these hospitals. So we, the Red Cross, I think it was Red Cross, are coming to you saying, don't hit these hospitals, and here's all the information on those hospitals. Russia took that, said thank you very much, used all of those coordinates and purposefully attacked all 24 hospitals. So they have form. Just, let you know that. So there's no surprise that hospitals are being hit. More shelling already this morning. Zaporizhzhia. So Zaporizhzhia is being targeted at the moment shelling happening there. MOD has said that an enemy base in Zeleny Yar, the occupied part of Zaporizhzhia Oblast, was hit. They claim that 20 soldiers were killed and 15 more wounded, and military equipment was lost as well. So Zeleny Yar is here. This is sort of southeast of Tokmak. Tokmak has been hit quite a bit because there have been facilities there and accumulations of equipment and troops. And Zeleny Yar is here. You've got Melitopol further to the southwest. Okay, where were we? Just could be nothing, could be something. Novy Urengoy, Russia, a parking box with a truck filled with fuel is on fire, local media reports, and that looks like a pretty substantial fire going on there. And just before we go onto the front lines, this is worth having a look at. So the amount of shelling locations reported by the Ukrainian General Staff was higher than usual today. We can see the hotspots are Svatove, Bakhmut, and Donetsk. Okay, let's have a look at this map a little bit more closely. What's interesting for me is that this northern border area is showing quite a lot of shelling. That's just north of Kharkiv. And then obviously Svatove is pretty hot. And then really all the way down this Donetsk, Luhansk to Donetsk line there. Obviously shelling is taking place in Kherson and a little bit along the Zaporizhzhia area. It starts getting hotter as you move towards, the corner a little bit more and up into Donetsk. Okay, let's look at the front lines. We're going to start in our northeastern area, which is Kupiansk down to Svatove, down to Kreminna. Up here, what can I tell you? Svatove-Kreminna area, Russia continues to build fortifications. This time bunkers are also added. And you can see they're heavily sort of fortifying this region, this whole line, trenches, and these sort of dragon's teeth, these pyramids of concrete, trying to think about future Ukrainian advances. Kupiansk area reported shelling around Vilshana, which I haven't really said anything about for ages. So Vilshana is just to the northeast of Kupiansk. Shelling going on there. Fighting going on in the contested areas, no indications of significant change in this section, and that's pretty much the story of everywhere. The Ukrainians have captured Novoselivska, which adjacent to Kuzmivka, which I've already put on my map some time ago. That's where there's heavy fighting. Though fighting is ongoing in Kuzmivka. Today, the Ukrainians hit Svatova multiple times with HIMARS and artillery. Locals reported the locations that were hit are known accumulation places of Russian forces. So again, pretty much the same as it has been. Kuzmivka is the heaviest area. The Russians say in Rybar or Rubar, to pronounce it correctly, I always say Rybar, but I think that's wrong. A situation in the Starobilsk direction is practically unchanged. Russian units as well as enemy forces carry out positional defense without utilizing large forces. The sides exchange artillery fire and recon group sorties to probe defenses. So basically, settlements in various parts of the front are grey areas. Basically, just it's neither one side nor the other. Just a lot of shelling and attacks either way and repelled attacks. At Kupiansk-Svatove, command of the Ukrainian 14th and 92nd Mechanized Brigades is restoring fighting ability and rotating personnel. This is something I've been saying about the Ukrainians, is that they do a lot of this rotation, which is exactly correct. And I'm not sure that Russians do that. I haven't really seen any evidence of the Russians rotating their troops, which means some of these troops have just been fighting non-stop for an incredibly long amount of time. Near Stelimakivka, the 92nd Brigade scout out Russian defenses using drones. They also carry out remote mining with PFM-1 anti-personnel mines. So there you go. That's the sort of thing that's happening there. Usual stuff, no particular change. And as we go further down south towards Kreminna, so this is up here, Kuzmivka, which is northwest of Svatova, is the scene of heavy fighting. This is the town next to it, Novoselivska, that is under Ukrainian control, as according to those sources. But I already had that. Lots of probably grey area. Really, no change to the maps that at least from any of the sources I've heard. And we get down to these sort of Kreminna area here, the Kreminna, Rubizhne, Severodonetsk, Lysychansk conurbation. And Noel report says no map changes. Battles going on south of Kreminna. Ukrainians are mostly probing the area more north, while reserves have been brought to the area. Artillery duels on the whole front line are taking place on a daily basis. The weather conditions make progress hard, and that's what I talked about yesterday and the day before, which is the wet conditions and the mud all along that front is pretty problematic. Okay, as we move further south to Bakhmut, again, just no particular news about these places. But artillery duels going on. Bakhmut is a very difficult environment still. Defmon says Russian attacks are intensifying here. Even if the Ukrainians repulse the attacks, the Russians keep coming, World War II style. The Russian forces have had partial success both north and south of Bakhmut. By that I mean they manage a few observation posts. So although it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, they are making some progress. It is very hard, and you wonder whether it's worth it in terms of the troops that the Russians are going through in this area. It's particularly difficult for them. Obviously difficult for the Ukrainians as well, but there you go. Bakhmutsky and Soledar, they are making a little bit of ground. They're attacking from the waste sorting plant still, and from the asphalt plant. So there's this kind of move in that direction for the Russians. And again, down by Klishchivka. What other things what do the sources say? So Russian sources claim that east of Bakhmut, near the recycling plant, we have no verification of this. So that's what I reported from the other day. Main areas of fighting are still Bakhmut, Opitny, Ivangrad, Yakovlivka, Bilorivka, that's to the north, and Soledar to the north as well. In the last two settlements, Russia sends in waves of infantry. So Soledar and Bilorivka. As I said, Soledar is there. Bilorivka is just further to the northeast. So waves of infantry, as according to Knoll reports. And that's what's happening there. And Andrew Perpetuous says that Russians are attempting to push toward Bakhmut from the asphalt plant. They attack Opitny from the east. Ukraine attempts to counterattack in Opitny, but they have no success. So that's how he interprets what's going on in Bakhmut. All offenses from the Russians there. And this is the asphalt plant. Russia pushes like this. I mean, as useful as that map is, that that's kind of what we know. They're pushing up into Bakhmut from the east, but you can't imagine they're going to have overwhelming success anytime soon. It's much of the same. And then we move on to Donetsk and Avdivka. Almost nothing to say about that other than, typically still very difficult. And Donetsk down to Marinka. So Marinka has, this is a site of potential Russian advance. So there are some Russian sources saying they have the center of Marinka now. Ukrainians have denied this. I've got it as a grey zone, but that is what a lot of people are talking about. I'm just going to go to, here's a, I think it's a Finnish volunteer, Kenneth Gregg, just has a few things to say about, the whole line, really. Worth just dipping into his commentary here. Just going to go down to the next missile attack. So this is talking about the electricity loss. The next missile attack will come in a week or two. This is the time the orcs need to equip their planes for attack. They have major logistical problems and the equipment is very old. This is why I was talking about, like, what does it mean that these cruise missile attacks aren't happening on consecutive days? Are they struggling to get hold of the missiles and then they scrape together some, then they send them, then they have to scrape together some more? And it seems to be a little element of this, at least according to this person. The front line is at a standstill except around Bakhmut and Marinka. The orcs, that's the derogatory term for the Russian soldiers, have had some success south of Bakhmut, but at a high price. One of our soldiers described the mass attacking as zombies. They can't even bend, but come forward fully upright despite our barrage, and they are many. He described the situation as bizarre. What makes people walk straight into a barrage without the slightest thought of trying to protect themselves? It's a really interesting thing to say, that. Marinka is almost under Russian control, a small community they have been trying to take for 2 months. We have launched the next offensive with heavy artillery and missile fire on the area between Dnipro and Crimea. Our intelligence is getting hold of the orcs' military coordinates and destroying them one by one. The pattern follows the liberation of Kherson, which is interesting. The orcs have withdrawn from the Dnipro shore except around Novokakhovka. They have also begun shelling Kherson. Whether this is a maneuver to prevent us from crossing the river before they have time to retreat further remains to be seen. I've been summoned, to the immigration, so he's trying to get his Ukrainian status. So that's all quite interesting about that. That's really the whole front, but it looks pretty horrible what he's saying about the advances the Russians are attempting around the Bakhmut area. As Defmon says, the Kremlin slaves attacked the area of Krasnohorivka and Marinka. The attacks were repulsed by the Ukrainians. Russian troop accumulations continue south of Donetsk. I'm getting indications we will see an attack by the Russians here soon. So that's interesting. So this is his map. So this is the Avdivka area, and this is the Marinka area, saying that they have been repelled there. But there's an accumulation south of Donetsk of Russian forces. That could be reinforcements from Kherson, not 100% sure, but that is worth knowing about or finding out about. Interesting if it's true. So as we go on from Marinka, we come down further south. So this seems to be where the Russians are accumulating troops, as according to Defmon. That could be relevant to south here, relevant to this Vuhledar region. So we've got Novomykhailivka here, being the site of attacks yesterday that I was talking to you about. Let's see what the sources say. So this is why the Vonovacha area is important. The Russians most likely want to restore the railroad link. Okay, so what's he talking about? So yesterday I was saying to you that the Russians are amassing in Volnovacha, which is here to the sort of south east of Vuhledar and Pavlivka. So they've been hitting Pavlivka day after day after day, and it seems that like they've kind of stopped a little bit because they recognize that they're just losing troops and are trying up here, but they're also amassing troops in Volnovakha. Well, what Defmon says is very important here, because if you look at his map, it shows the rail links, and there's a very important rail link that comes through either south or through Donetsk, but this is probably the Ilovaisk. This was hit with HIMARS attacks last week, I think it was. It's been hit a couple of times, Ilovaisk. Fuel tanks on the railway line there. So that's to try and stop this link feeding into the whole Zaporizhia across to Kherson Oblast. But here, the railway line comes very close to the front line. So we've got Stepna here and down to Volnovakha. So an accumulation of troops here. It could be with a view to pushing this. Really, the Russians want to push this front line back to give themselves a buffer zone so that this railway line can continue to be operational without getting hit. And that's what Defmon is talking about there. So as you can see here, the railway line comes very close to here. It comes very close to the front line. So it's vulnerable. Okay, what does no report say? Pavlivka is still 50-50. Russian forces control the south. Ukrainians have fire control over the north and adjacent supply lines. Russian keeps building on troops in Volnovakha. So it just said that, and Russian claims that they took the city center of Marinka are false. Okay, so to have Pavlivka 50-50, you wonder actually whether there really are any Ukrainian troops here, or whether they kind of control this by artillery control and fire control from both Vuhledar and further back with their artillery batteries. So it could be controlling that means not having troops, but the Russians aren't in there because they just get pummeled every time they move into that area. I don't know. That's just an open question for myself. Okay, so that's the end of that source for that area. In occupied, so this is going a little bit to the west towards Zaporizhia. Occupied Polohoy, locals recorded 4 Kamaz trucks full of dead Russian soldiers coming back from the front line. Also, a local collaborator was blown up in the town. So it's just a little bit of news that there are just huge amounts of dead soldiers all over the place. I'm talking about Melitopol. Plenty of unconfirmed news, most notably reports of action overnight at the airfield, explosions followed by a fire, but no photos. Locals say Russia is moving reinforcements into the area, but more explosions heard in Mykhailovka, which is 35 miles north of Melitopol. So things are being hit behind the line. Melitopol is, often under attack. So here we go. There's Zeleny Yar that was hit. And we have Melitopol here. So things getting hit around here. Zeleny Yar has been hit and people dying there. So HIMARS and other systems are very active around here. And you wonder whether Melitopol is being hit because of, a bit like Kherson, the Ukrainians are softening the area ready for an attack down there. That has been long sort of hinted at, but we shall see. Okay, let's move on to Kherson, and no real changes there, just a lot of heavy bombardments from both sides. Now the enemy is setting up defensive positions on the left bank of the Dnipro. The enemy has mined the coastline and is setting up firing positions 15 to 20 kilometers deep because it understands that it will have to retreat. Russia will not be able to hold the left bank south of the Kherson region, says Operational Room South. Quote, Russia understand the failure of their military strategy. The deoccupation of the right bank returns the enemy to the understanding that the Ukraine continue to establish fire control over the enemy's transport arteries. Ukrainian artillery can already reach the lines that they are building on the left bank near the Armyansk region. On the right bank of the Dnipro, they built a multi-layered defense along which they retreated. Now the enemy is setting up defensive positions on the left bank of the Dnipro. And that's where we get to the 15 to 20 kilometers deep, because it understands that it will have to retreat. So this is, what Russia are doing here, like by effectively moving back and building up really heavy defensive lines this far back. shows that they are getting ready for an attack from the Ukrainians, and they will understand that they will have to retreat to those positions at some point. So that tells you quite a lot about their mindset. Over to the front with Kherson. So no map changes. Kozachi Lageri village is left by the Russians. Only non-systematic patrols visit the settlement, which is there. So this is on the left bank of the Dnipro. Said an advisor to the mayor of Mariupol. Kherson was shelled for the whole day. 10 people were injured and 4 died. This is a continued shelling of the civilian city of Kherson from the Russians. Also, explosions tonight in Novokhovka. This is the important settlement that is here, where the dam is, and there are bridges across there, or you can get across there for that. And finally, just to say, overnight, Ukrainian forces hit multiple targets in occupied Kherson and Crimea, amongst them Chaplinka and Armyansk, where air defense activity was reported. This week, Russia raised the terrorist threat level to high in Armyansk and forcibly evacuated people. So again, you've got this idea that Crimea is, and the areas towards Crimea are, so there's Armyansk, are under threat, and they're feeling defensively minded at the moment. Anyway, not a lot of changes on the map, but hopefully that's useful for all of you. Please like, subscribe, and share the video. Any support of my channel is hugely appreciated. YouTube keep putting restricted ads for my videos for no particular reason, and that's really frustrating. So any other help can be very, very useful for me. So thank you. And please check out my Ukraine war extra video that I will be bringing out later. Anyway, toodle pips.